Hey folks, today I'd like to talk about a scenario that we don't drill for, we don't plan for, we don't table talk drill for on either a local, state, or federal level, but it is something that we really need to think about. The long-term loss of the electric grid is a plausible scenario. 7 U.S. government departments and agencies have now concluded that if our national electric grid is not upgraded to ensure its continuity in the event of a massive solar event, which happen about every 100 years, or of an attack, we could face a blackout lasting 4 to 10 years, costing countless lives and potentially bringing cataclysmic damage to U.S. society as we know it. It could emerge as the most severe crisis in modern history. Where did this come from? This came from 2 members of Congress, one Republican and one Democrat. Representative Yvette Clarke, a Democrat from New York, is the ranking member of the Cybersecurity, Infrastructure Protection, and Security Technologies Subcommittee of the Homeland Security Committee. And Representative Trent Franks, a Republican from Arizona, serves on the Judiciary and the Armed Services Committee. Both are members of the Electromagnetic Pulse Caucus in Congress, and both are co-chairmen of the Electric Infrastructure Security Summit. The electric grid is vulnerable. It's vulnerable to cyber attack, to physical attack, electromagnetic pulse weapons, solar flares, and even a good old-fashioned cascading failure for miscellaneous reasons, such as we saw in the 2003 blackout, which 55 million people lost power in the Northeast. We've never had a national scale catastrophe. The federal, state, and local governments are completely unprepared for a national scale grid outage. What would happen if we had a national scale grid outage? Well, if you just think of the basic things, people will be without heat, AC, and refrigeration. People will lose city water and well pumps. Sanitation services will stop. Food will stop coming in. Fuel will stop coming in. Medicine and medical supplies to pharmacies will stop. And emergency generators only have so much fuel. And this is just on the first day. After a month, emergency generators are long out of fuel. People are starving. People are sick from waterborne diseases. People are getting injured because they're doing non-traditional tasks just to try to stay alive. Medical services are scant or non-existent. Armed gangs are going from house to house looking for resources and committing crimes. And emergency personnel, such as your fire, police, and EMS, are staying home to protect their families. They aren't coming into work anymore. The state and the federal governments are nowhere to be found. This is just after a month. We are not prepared for a national scale catastrophe. Our emergency management system depends on outside resources. As a disaster gets bigger, it depends on being able to bring in resources from the outside. Your town itself has limited disaster resources and depends on federal and state aid. There are over 35,000 cities and towns in the United States. Do the math. With over 35,000 cities and towns in the United States, and each one looking for outside resources and assistance, the federal and state governments quickly would be overwhelmed. Governments will not be able to provide food, water, medical services, and security to their towns. Millions could die. When state and local governments can't provide basic needs and security, anarchy will soon result. Desperate people will resort to anything to get food and resources, and we will experience a societal collapse. How will we die? We will die from starvation. We will die from disease. We will die from lack of medical care, and we will kill each other as law and order collapses, or we go into anarchy. Now, the very strength of our emergency management system is also a critical weakness. Our emergency management system gives us the capability to do anything from a very, very small auto accident in a town all the way up to huge regional disasters such as hurricanes. And it depends on being able to bring in outside resources if the local resources are overwhelmed by the scale of the emergency. But think of it. We have 35,000 towns and cities in the United States. So what's the plan if all 35,000 towns and cities need help? There is no plan. Nobody from the outside is going to come in and be your incident commander. All eyes are on you, local emergency management. In a national scale catastrophe, survival will be a local issue. Your town is on its own. Are you prepared for this? Emergency managers, mayors, leaders in towns and cities across America, are you prepared to handle this alone? Let's talk a little bit about anarchy, which is something that we've seen even in regional disasters, and think back to Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Andrew, and even some of the blackouts over the years. Just in a regional area or a local area, anarchy can break out very quickly. Now, the definition of anarchy is the absence of government, or a situation of confusion and wild behavior in which people in a country, group, organization, etc. are not controlled by rules and laws. So anarchy is the state of lawlessness that is due to the absence of government authority. Power outage does not cause the anarchy. What causes the anarchy isn't the actual event, such as a hurricane or a power outage, or in this case, what we're talking about, the grid being taken down nationally for a long period of time. Rather, what causes the anarchy is that the government becomes ineffective. It is unable to protect and provide food, water, and services to the people. So the antidote to anarchy is actually fairly simple. Don't let the government become ineffective. The catch to this is that it requires a plan. And the plan is community prepping or civil defense. The goals would be that the local government remains effective. There is no anarchy. There's a security plan for the town. There are prepared resources for the town, such as food and water, medical. There are plans and preparations made for known issues. I mean, it's really not hard to think of what will happen if the power goes down for a long period of time. We can fairly easily come up with what the problems are going to be. We need to think ahead and plan ahead for solutions if that ever happens. It's too late to do it after the fact. And then finally, we have a catalog of the necessary skills that we would need in our town. For example, do we know who the doctors and the nurses are? And have we planned ahead of time to provide an opportunity for us to be able to provide medical services to the town? Many towns don't have a hospital, and if you don't, you would need to plan ahead of time for how you would provide medical care for the town, and many other necessary skills that you would need. So who says that civil defense is a good idea? Well, a bipartisan group in Congress thinks it's a good idea. In August of 2012, a bipartisan group of members of Congress, 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans, as a matter of fact, proposed a resolution which encouraged towns and cities across America to come up with a community-based civil defense plan in case of a long-term power outage. Now, I find it very, very significant that this was a bipartisan group in Congress. Now, if you're wondering why we're even talking about this, why could the grid possibly be vulnerable to all of these things I talked about at the beginning? Well, it is true. They have been trying to pass legislation for years to protect the grid. They haven't been able to do so thus far. There are presently a couple of bills in Congress, but we don't know what the outcome of that's going to be. The outcome over the last couple of Congresses has been no legislation to protect the grid. Well, finally, a group of congressmen put together a resolution basically saying to communities, you're going to be on your own if the grid goes down, and you need to come up with a civil defense plan in order to protect yourselves. Now, this civil defense plan encourages every community to develop a civil defense program working with all of the elements of the community so that it can mitigate high impact scenarios and better be prepared to survive and recover from these worst case disaster scenarios. Now, the good thing about this, too, is if you're prepared for the worst case scenario, that basically means you're prepared for anything. So there really is no downside to us preparing for a worst case scenario, and especially since a worst case scenario is a plausible scenario, it could happen. Now, unfortunately, this resolution died in committee. It never even saw the floor for a vote. However, a good idea does not need to pass Congress to be a good idea. And several of these same members of Congress are members of the Congressional EMP Caucus who are working very hard to try to pass legislation to protect the electric grid. But this resolution really brought forth the idea that we cannot be depending on the state and the federal government to come in and help us if 35,000 cities and towns across America all at once are all in a pickle. We are going to need to be able to take care of ourselves. Well, nobody's got a budget for this, and if that's the first thought that comes to mind, that nobody has a budget, for this level of preparedness, you're not alone. Nobody else has it either. I don't think there are too many towns or cities across America who right now just have a lot of extra money hanging around that they could do something with. However, there is a solution to this. The solution would be to start a nonprofit civil defense organization and engage the community, plan and solve problems as a community. Every little bit helps. Right now, as I'm making this video, we do not have towns and cities across the United States that are prepared for a worst case scenario. However, every little bit your community can do to help to start to prepare itself for this is going to help and is going to save lives. There is a plan available. Prepping for a suburban or rural community, building a civil defense plan for a long-term catastrophe is exactly on this subject and provides the only plan that I know of right now that is out there for a suburban or rural community to start a civil defense organization and be able to get themselves prepared for a worst-case national catastrophe. Your town needs a plan. The alternative is unacceptable. Thank you very much for watching.